Don't miss Freedom Summit Chicago 2017, Saturday, November 11th, featuring Dinesh D'Souza and Oliver North. Tickets on sale now at freedomsummitchicago.com.
Dan and Amy, I've got a comment before we go to our friend Steve Moore on this rather amusing piece in the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago called In Defense of the Dismal Science, Economists Defending Economists. And it's reminiscent of the old economist joke, if you laid every economist in the world end to end, they couldn't reach a conclusion.
That's so funny.
They couldn't reach a conclusion. Yeah. That's my opener when I do the dinner theater circuit. This professor concedes that economists didn't predict the financial crisis, but they did help to arrest it by applying theory and experience. Professor Rice saying the economy did not die and a Great Depression was avoided in no small part due to the advances of economics over many decades. Yeah, so here's what economists do. Not our forthcoming guest, but no one should hold economists accountable for their failure to predict what will happen, but we should nevertheless render full confidence to the same people for being able to predict what would have happened. You see the contradiction there? Mm-hmm. And so, all of this needs to not be based on appeals to authority, Paul Krugman, awards, but in terms of standards and, track records, I would suggest. So now we're going to hold Steve Moore to those standards. Steve Moore, Chief Economist over at Heritage Foundation. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, guys. By the way, as the story goes, if you lined every economist up end to end, it would be a good thing.
Yes, exactly, right. It's kind of like...
By the way, I did read that article in the Wall Street Journal on Saturday, and I think he came to the wrong conclusion. I think economists have a lot of explaining to do in terms of the crazy predictions and crazy policy recommendations they come up with so often. And so one of the lines in the piece you may recall, Dan, is at the end he said, "Well, most economists agree that the recovery plan, the stimulus plan that Obama put in place was a big success and reduced employment." First of all, A, I don't agree with that. I think it actually made the recession worse. B, that's even if you look at Obama's own numbers, they did an analysis of what the unemployment rate would be if they didn't have the stimulus back when they were proposing it. And it turns out every year the unemployment rate was higher with the stimulus than it would have been without the stimulus. So is the thing a success?
Well, here's saying most economists agree is kind of like saying the debate is settled. It's people who don't have a substantive argument to make, so they're appealing to kind of groupthink. But speaking of economics, and in conjunction with the as we were discussing both natural and man-made disaster in the Houston area, a lot of silly things are being said, including that natural disasters, this is an old saw, and this is part of our history, too. World War II led to the reindustrialization of America, right? Yeah, natural disasters or man-made disasters, a boon to economic growth. Please explain to our friends and listening audience Bastiat's fallacy of the broken window.
Yeah, right. Well, this is such an inane thing. I mean, if this were a good thing, then we should have 100 feet of water in Houston, 100 inches, and then we'd have a real economic recovery. Look, you don't fix an economy by, as Bastiat said, going out and breaking every window and then having someone repair the windows that were destroyed. So that's a complete fallacy. Now, the other one is, the federal government is going to. This is a great economics lesson too. So we've had, believe it or not, people, we have had natural disasters before, pre climate change. The catastrophe of climate change. But let me give you a couple examples. So I think you're there in Chicago area, aren't you? I think.
Yeah.
Back 100 years ago or so, there was a great fire.
1871. Yes.
We remember it well.
Yeah.
You were a young lad,
Amy, right?
Yeah, I was there.
And then
Standing
of course
next to
we
the
had,
cow.
Galveston was totally destroyed by a hurricane back in the early 1900s. Of course, we had the San Francisco earthquake. I think that was about sometime around the turn of the century. In every one of those cases, I went back and just looked at what kind of federal intervention there was to rebuild those cities, and very little. Very little. The federal government played almost no part in rebuilding San Francisco or Chicago or Galveston. You can go on and on. The one area where the federal government played a big role, of course, was in New Orleans after Katrina. And that was the worst recovery effort ever. So keep the federal government out of this. The idea that the federal government has to rush in and spend tens and tens of billions of dollars is crazy. The cleanup should be done with private charity money, with private relief efforts by local churches and local organizations. Now, that's not to say the federal government shouldn't come in and provide some immediate emergency assistance, but the idea that the federal government has to rebuild Houston is crazy. That can be done.
Don't you think FEMA's got to provide trailers for these people? I mean, a lot of them don't even have insurance.
Of course. Look, you provide people emergency aid right now, and people all over the country are going to Houston. I think it's an amazingly humanitarian thing to do. What I'm saying is I just don't want to see a massive federal quote relief effort. I mean, I did a big study back in when was Katrina? Back in 2000,
it was 12 years ago.
Was it?
Yeah, 2006.
They were giving people these debit cards, with $5,000. People were going out and buying, $400 purses and, lobster meals and things like that. I mean, it's just ridiculous how much money was wasted on the Katrina effort. Let's not do that again.
And same thing with Hurricane Sandy. I mean, there's, Ted Cruz and others are being criticized for supporting relief for Houston while they oppose the relief package for Hurricane Sandy, or Hurricane Sandy Hook, as Sheila Jackson Lee would call it. But the point there that Cruz made on MSNBC and others made, so it was a small part of relief for the actual victims of Hurricane Sandy, and it was a large part of politicians larding in all kinds of pork, using this as an opportunity to raid the coffers. Yeah,
in fact, actually, after Katrina, I did this. They passed this massive, I forget the number, $50 to $100 billion, supplemental spending bill, and a lot of the money didn't even go to Louisiana or Texas. It went to places, on the East Coast. Maine got money, California got money, So it just became a pork fest, and I worry, now that we have $1 trillion a year deficits, we're going to start spending money on pork. And I guarantee you heard it first here on WIND, that when they pass this relief effort, a lot of the money won't even go to Houston.
That's a shame. Hey, speaking of Hurricane Harvey, the largest oil refinery has just been shut down near the Texas-Louisiana border. We should gas up now?
Yep. Yeah, gas prices are going to rise, no question about it. They're starting to trickle up a little bit. I think that you're going to see higher gas prices, no question about it. Houston is the energy capital of the United States, and there's no question, Amy, that you're going to see higher gasoline prices. The refineries have been hard hit. That's how you get your gasoline, folks, is from refineries. So I don't know how much, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw temporarily 30 to 50 cent increase in gasoline prices for a few weeks as we adjust to this terrible crisis. I mean, Houston really is the center of energy development and refinery in this country. So gas up now.
I want to get your take on a piece by Joel Kotkin in the New Geography at newgeography.com. He's a Chapman University professor, right? You know Kotkin. This is about Silicon Valley, and it's making its way around because of what he suggests. He says Silicon Valley is going to finish off democracy, or more accurately, our representative republic. He writes, the new hierarchy, talking about Silicon Valley, is narrowing the path to riches or even the middle class. Rather than expand opportunity, the Valley increasingly creates jobs in the gig economy that promises not a way to the middle class, much less riches, but into the rising precariat, part-time conditional workers. The emerging gig economy will likely expand the digitization of retail, which could cost millions of working-class jobs. So we're talking about automation, artificial intelligence, and and the Silicon Valley oligarchs. Do you agree with the concerns he raises?
Only partly. I think, look, the whole history of our country is technological progress. I mean, if you want to go back to having millions and millions of more jobs, get rid of, as Milton Friedman used to say, just get rid of tractors on farms, and then we can all work in the fields again, and we'll have plenty of jobs. But what robotics and automation will do is make us richer, and it will mean that that you're going to have more of the jobs that we do in the 21st century will be jobs that are enjoyable, writing music or computer games and things like that involve your brain, not your brawn. Are we going to lose jobs because of this? I mean, look, there is going to be an adjustment. I read a report the other day that 1 out of every 11 male workers, that's you and me, Dan, in America, is employed driving a vehicle. A lot of people listening to the show right now are driving a vehicle.
Thank goodness for them.
15 years, most of those jobs won't exist. They'll be driverless cars and so on. But no, I'm not worried about the future. I think the future is the greatest time ever in the history of the world to be alive, with the amazing inventions that are coming in terms of robotics and 3D imaging and all of this stuff that's going to make life on Earth better, and we're all going to get rich on it. So I don't agree with that. I don't agree at all with the politics. Now, the big debate that's going on right now with respect to all of this is, should we have this guaranteed minimum income? I don't know if you guys have been following this. Mm-hmm. You just give everybody, $35,000. It's an interesting debate. Charles Murray, who's one of the strongest conservatives and one of the great minds in our country, has actually endorsed this idea. I worry that if you just start giving away money to people, you're going to just reduce the work ethic, and everybody's going to drop out of the workforce. So, but it's an interesting idea. But Silicon Valley is getting so rich on this. My son just moved out to Silicon Valley. He's one of these brainiac tech whizzes and nerds, and he's paying $2,000 a month for this prison cell in San Francisco. It's amazing the boom in that area. And the question really is, how do we make sure everybody benefits from this? And the idea is everybody should buy stocks. Everybody should get in the stock market. Why don't we privatize the Social Security system and let people put their payroll taxes into owning companies so that we're all owner capitals?
Yeah, there's an idea. And another idea is you better be nice to your son, since he's one of the forthcoming oligarchs.
I know he's going to be one of these guys who's going to be a billionaire by the time he's 40, and I hope he remembers the little people like myself that helped him on the way up.
Dad.
All right, Steve Moore, Dad, Wall Street Journal columnist and senior economist at CNN and chief economist at Heritage Foundation. Steve, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a great week. Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.